2023 Village Board meeting to order. Heidi, could you lead us in the pledge, please? Oh, never mind. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, Allison, roll call, please.
Trustee Michaels?
Aye.
Trustee Lindy?
Aye.
Trustee Heron?
Here.
Trustee Bonnie?
Here.
President Conan?
Here.
Trustee Shomas? And Trustee White are absent. We have a quorum.
Thank you. We have a forum this evening. Nothing under public hearings. First, just as a reminder before we get going, we do have a very full room. This room is kind of like an echo chamber, so if you're talking amongst yourselves, sometimes we can't hear each other talk. So if I hear a lot of background noise, I will address it. But sorry, I don't even think it's on. Is it on? No, okay. Hopefully you all heard that. Okay, first up, Chief. Under appointments and presentations, we're going to go with the SRO officer.
President Conan, Board, and Village Board, it's my pleasure to introduce Officer Brett Taylor. Brett's been with us for 17 years. As a reminder, a little over a month ago, 2 months ago, we were approached by Keeneland School District with a request to put in a school resource officer at the middle school. Village Administrator Gopal and myself met with their administration. We're in agreement that this was a great opportunity for us to fill and to have a body present during the school days. In addition to that, there was a strong interest within the department to fill the position from internal candidates, and a selection process took place. And it's my pleasure to introduce Officer Brett Taylor as a new school resource officer. So he's been out there since September 11th. He started Monday, and then at probably 3 o'clock, 3:30, I rang his phone and said, "How was your first day at school?" So I just, for clarification purposes, the school services 5 different communities. So Officer Taylor has to be a liaison, not just for us here in Sugar Grove, but he also reaches out to the other communities to keep them informed of activities that are occurring, and then share that information back and forth. Officer Taylor, as I said, has been with us for 17 years. He spent 7 years in investigations, back on patrol, and now reassigned into investigations, but currently he's going to be at the school Monday through Friday, and then during the holidays and summer and spring breaks, he'll be reassigned back into the police department. We can tap him, obviously, if something happens in the community, something's occurring, we need an extra body. So I'd like to introduce, wait, one more thing, one more important thing is, when I first got here, I never knew anything about, had to present to the board a Carnegie Life Saving Award. So for those that were here and on the board, Officer Taylor is a recipient of the Carnegie Life Saving Award for saving an individual's life that was drowning. So that's all.
Well, I'm pleased to be into the schools, be a resource, be the first line of safety. Anytime the kids need to go, the students need to go somewhere, they can come to me. Any problems they may or may not have, and just to be a positive influence and hopefully steer those students in the right direction. Thank you.
You're going to be excellent.
Well, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay, up next, under presentations, we have the April 30th, 2023 annual comprehensive financial report. I believe Jennifer is presenting for us tonight.
Yes, good evening.
Good evening.
I am Jennifer Martinson with Lauterbach and Amon, here to present the audit results for the fiscal year ended April 30th, 2023. I do want to start, as I always do, by thanking Matt and Brett for all of their hard work and coordination during the audit process. It's a much smoother process, always because of them, so thank you so much. As the board knows, an audit is required by state statute to be completed by an independent auditor each fiscal cycle. And really the goal of the audit is for us as your auditors to be able to provide an opinion on the financial statements presented this evening. And we have done that. We have issued an unmodified opinion, which is a clean audit opinion. That is the highest opinion that we can issue, and it really just means that the financial statements presented this evening are materially correct, or do in fact accurately represent the financial position of the Village of Sugar Grove. So really most important news of the evening, of this part of the presentation, we'll say, is a clean audit opinion for the audit report. I know it's a rather large document, so I do want to point out a few areas for you to draw your attention to focus on, just to get the highlights really there. So there's 3 major sections. Within the first section, which is your introductory section, I do want to point out 2 things. On page 3, you'll find your transmittal letter, which this is a non-financial letter, just really introducing the village as a whole. So it's written in management's words, has some really key information about the village as well as major initiatives. So again, non-financial introduction there. And then more importantly, the Certificate of Achievement, which is on page 9. So this is the Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting that has been awarded to the village again. I believe it's over 20 years now that the village has received this award, so congratulations. That was received for fiscal year 2022, so the prior year, and we will be submitting this report as well, and do anticipate the village will receive that again. So very prestigious award that speaks highly to the transparency of the reporting that the village puts out. The next section is the financial section, and most importantly here is what we call management's discussion and analysis, or the MD&A for short, and that's going to be on page 16. And really, I know this report in front of you is over 160 pages. There's a lot of information. That section itself is really the executive summary of the audit report. So it's going to break down this entire report really in 10 easy-to-read narrative pages that cover all of the financial information to follow. So we'll really touch on those highlights for the year. And if you read just those 10 pages, you'll have a full understanding of this entire document. So very helpful to spend your time there. Just to touch briefly on one highlight for the year, overall governmental funds for the village did see an increase of approximately $2.1 million, with ending fund balance of $13.3 million, of which about $2.3 million of that is in the general or the operating fund for the village. Finally, within that section, the budgetary comparison schedules that start on page 93 and continue in more detail on page 97 is another area for the board to spend some time. You'll be able to see the comparisons, as I said, between the budget and the actual revenues and expenditures for the year. And then finally, the last section is your statistical section, which starts on page 130. I think this is one of the best parts of the audit report. It's going to have 10 years of trend information all in one place for the board to be able to review. So it will have property taxes, major revenues, expenditures, again, all of those trending information in one place. So 10 years of information there. We also issue a smaller document, which is your management letter. And really this year, the only comment to address this evening to let the board know in that management letter would be just the funds over budget. So there were a few funds over budget. You'll see more detail within that comment there. But otherwise, any of the new comments are really related to upcoming standards. So the Government Accounting Standards Board has issued quite a few statements that we'll have to address in reporting over the next few years. And we'll work very closely with Matt to make sure those are implemented. So there's some more detail there just so you're aware of what is coming, and we'll work through what impact that could potentially have on the financial statements in the future. And then finally, I'd be required to communicate if we add any disagreements during the audit, difficulties with management, anything of that nature, and I'm happy to report that we did not. So again, overall clean audit opinion, that award again for the Certificate of Achievement and Excellence for Financial Reporting, and be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Does the board have any questions for her?
Thank you. I know it takes a lot of time to prepare this for us, so.
Another good positive year, so Matt, congratulations to you and your team as well. And to the staff overall for maintaining and being fiscally responsible with your own budgets within your own department.
Yes.
Thank you. Sean, did you have anything?
No, I'll review it. We have our
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you so much. Have a great evening.
Okay. Up next, we have a presentation for the tax increment financing TIF. One-on-one discussion with, we'll introduce Jeff with SB Friedman is here to kind of go over it with the board. He has a presentation for us.
Great, thanks. Good to see everybody. As the Mayor said, my name is Jeff Dickinson. I'm with the firm of SB Friedman Development Advisors. We are economic development consultants. We work on public-private partnerships. That's sort of the broad strokes role that we play, is helping, generally speaking, municipalities, units of government interact with the private sector on redevelopment efforts. That is not an everyday exercise for most municipalities, but it's an everyday exercise for us. So I bring a lot of experience in that. I'm happy to share this slide deck and sort of walk through some highlights of key things to think about in the arena of public-private finance. Some good advance this slide on it. Thank you. The first thing I like to talk about in this context is, why do towns do this at all? Why do villages get involved in development, basically, beyond the normal regulatory role that they play? The reason at the highest level is things aren't happening that the community wants. That is to say, there are public policy goals. Land use development is largely a function of the private sector, but there are certain tools and levers, including TIF, that are authorized by the state of Illinois to allow policymakers like a village board to make something happen that wouldn't otherwise happen. And so this whole universe is about special challenges and opportunities. I guess that's it. It's not garden variety stuff. It's not usually how do we get a gas station at the corner. It's not usually how do we get a new, this or that. It's something big. It's something strange, essentially, that's not happening that the community wants. So as long as that's the starting place, then the boards and organizations and communities have to think about, how do we use a tool like this to get the outcome that we're looking for, that we're not seeing. On the next slide is just a brief description of what is tax increment financing. I know the village has a couple tips, and there's some maps of those in here, including this one. But just for the good of everybody, it is a locally controlled source of revenue, the largest, most powerful locally controlled source of revenue to do these kinds of projects, these special projects. This is a map of the TIF district. This is your TIF 1. It's authorized by state statute. You have to define an area. The whole village is not in a TIF today, nor would it be. And it is a flexible tool, relatively, to allow communities to generate financial resources and then provide them to make these special projects happen. A common concern is that it's a tax increase. It is not. It is an allocation, a reallocation, a redirection, if you will, of the taxes that come from development into a special fund, the Special Tax Allocation Fund, which is controlled by the board. Again, the board today has 2 TIF funds that they control and can elect to spend those TIF dollars in ways that advance the goals of the community, which are defined obviously by this group and also by the TIF plans that exist. So the 2 TIFs that exist have guiding plans, and the board can spend money that is in those funds to try to achieve those goals. In the context of dealing with developers, and again, it's an important thing to say, it's not an entitlement. It is a completely discretionary tool. So when villages choose to use TIF, it's a choice, and it's a choice because they believe it's the best way, it's the only way, usually, to get the outcomes that they're looking for. So that requires that a fair bit of scrutiny go to these types of projects. It's a rare thing to put public money into a private project, and if it doesn't work, it doesn't work, and the projects don't happen. The village, even if they've done a similar project in the past, unlike with zoning, I'm not a zoning lawyer, but there's precedent happening there. TIF is, every time you do a TIF deal, it's a new decision. And so it takes time, it takes consideration, and it is a discretionary choice every time a village chooses to spend it, be it on a public project or a public-private project. So the next slide, I guess I've sort of said this, towns use TIF to encourage a particular kind of growth, generally stuff that they're not seeing that they really want. It's also a blight elimination tool, so it could be getting rid of a bad thing. Sometimes it's trying to get a good thing that's not otherwise happening, or it could be both. Those are different ways to look at why a municipality would use a TIF tool. It can be motivated by a variety of things. We want to change the tax base of our community over time. Some towns are almost exclusively residential, and that's a tax base concentration challenge. And over the long term, that's a fiscal concern. Some towns care a lot about their downtown around a train station. They want to create housing because they want more restaurants downtown. So it is, what are the economic development goals? We want more jobs. People say we wish we had more jobs. I'm sick of driving an hour to work every day. Let's make something happen that might happen eventually, but it wouldn't happen soon to produce the jobs we want. So again, this all comes out of policy, land use policy made by this board and prior boards to think about what is the future of the community want to be, and then TIF is a tool, again, probably the most powerful tool to help tip some of those projects into the feasible realm. It can be used, as I said, to fund public infrastructure and improvements. That's a common use of funds. Road, water, and sewer extensions, that's a pretty common use of TIF, particularly in the communities in the edge of the region. In more urban areas, it's more commonly a redevelopment tool. How do we get rid of a building we don't like? How do we reconfigure or assemble land that's challenging through long-term ownership or whatever? Extraordinary development costs, we sometimes see sites that are in trouble. There's an extraordinary detention problem or environmental problems. Sometimes it is, we wish we had apartments. Again, in some towns that's important, the market isn't producing them. They say, but we want to make that market happen. We're going to incentivize the first one, prove that it can work, and then the next developer can build without it. So again, this is all very much a function of the town and the goals of the community, but it is flexible enough as a tool, when used correctly, to be able to make all of these sorts of things, or help make all these sorts of things happen. That is still substantially private driven. Private development required. You need new investment, private investment to create income and taxes, but the public sector has a key role to play. And sometimes it's about retaining investment. Communities are at risk of losing an employer, and they're worried about that, or a big retailer, and they choose to use TIF as a tool to retain that for a variety of reasons. So that's important. Those are all various ways and motivations to use TIF. One thing that people sometimes ask is, everybody, the market wants to build housing here, or the market wants to build retail here. The thing that the TIF tool can help fix is the financial feasibility. Sure, people want to live here, but not here, in a community. But sometimes the rents or the sales prices aren't high enough to support the construction costs at this point. And so to help make that market work, you can achieve financial feasibility. Sure, the houses are great, people love them, but they sell for more than anybody's willing to pay right now. So if you can marginally reduce the cost to deliver it, you can get those outcomes. So it's a sort of a nuanced point about market feasibility versus financial feasibility. But it's a tool in that struggle. What can it pay for? State law has a list of things TIF can pay for. Public or private costs can be legal. The list on the slides here, commonly, demo, remediation, detention, extension of public right-of-way, that's the second to last bullet. Soft costs, architects, engineers, lawyers, consultants. Financing costs. There's a fair number of things that TIF can pay for. It cannot pay for new buildings, I guess, flat out. So the building itself is not an eligible cost, but a lot of things around development that can help make the project feasible are eligible. So you have to structure the use of TIF in a way that obviously respects state law and applies the costs, or funds costs, appropriate costs. On the next slide, I think is sort of reframing some of the things I've already said. It's got to support important public policy goals. That's the sort of most fundamental issue when you're thinking about using TIF. It's got to become feasible with assistance. If the gap between what the project wants to be and the problem, the gap, whatever, there's a $10 million problem. If TIF is only an $8 million solution, TIF can't fix the problem. You have to have a fixable problem. So in very weak markets, that's more of a common problem. The difference between market feasible plus TIF still doesn't get you to financially feasible. Again, those situations don't arise all the time, but it can't fix a deeply distressed market. It can only marginally enhance the returns of a project generally. The lower left quadrant, you've got to believe, as a consultant in my position or a village board member, that the project wouldn't go but for the assistance. That's one of the most important questions. If the project would go without TIF, you shouldn't give TIF, and that is part of the discussion and the analysis and the thinking when considering giving TIF money to a project. It is the necessary trigger to unlock a project. If it's going to happen anyway, it should happen, and you should let it happen, and don't intervene. I don't think anybody wants villages intervening in development unless there's really an absolute need to do so. And finally, it's got to justify the investment. And again, the metrics for that vary. Some of them are very fiscally driven, tax dollars, greater than 1-to-1. Sometimes it's foggier. We want to change the culture or the climate of our community. We want to change the perception of our community. We want to grow the tax base, the employment base. Again, those are all community-defined goals. But there's got to be a belief that if we're going to give them this, we're going to get that, and that's a good trade. And that's it's partially a math calculation, but partially it's a policy decision that boards have to make about what is an appropriate way to use the tool. There are a couple of TIFs in town. I don't know a lot about them, so I've got some very basic facts that we have learned, but we know that the villages use them, and there are plans in TIF 1 to fund a sanitary sewer extension, a very normal TIF cost. In TIF 2, utility line burial, again, that's a public infrastructure investment that would obviously benefit the rest of, again, I don't know the details, I presume it's going to be a lot prettier and perhaps more usable land if you can get that thing underground. So that's the normal, those are some of the kinds of things you can do with TIF, and those are things that are happening either right now or in the works. The benefits of the tool, villages, it is not, how do I put this? The money that comes out of TIF is new taxes that wouldn't exist but for the redevelopment project, as I said. There's nothing there, or very little tax in certain places. So you're not giving away money from the general fund. The audit says you've got X dollars in the fund. It's not taking money out of that pot. It's taking new money that would not exist without the development. And so that's a nice thing from a municipal financial perspective. It can change the calculus from infeasible to feasible. That's when we get involved usually, is helping make sure that that is true, and make projects happen, basically. It is locally controlled. State law authorizes villages to create TIFs and use the money from TIF to do what's best for their town. The state doesn't try to tell you what is best for your town. They just give a tool as a source of revenue to do these challenging projects, basically. It is a flexible tool. It can pair up with other sources that are authorized by the state. Business districts is one. Sales tax sharing agreements. So you can try to cobble together all the sources when you need to, and they can work together in certain situations. And it is useful to fund public costs. So it's another way to pay for public expenditures, both on the capital side and the operating side. Common challenges or criticisms of TIF. Will it result in a property tax increase? Short answer is no. As I said, it's a diversion of the taxes. So the new taxes, the incremental taxes that occur after redevelopment are diverted into the TIF fund. Tax rate is not affected. It's not a new tax. It's just a diversion of these taxes that wouldn't exist but for the use of TIF district. Commonly, there's not really a do nothing option. Doing nothing means either taxes are stagnant or declining generally in places that would get involved in or tax bases, and therefore, tax returns can be stagnant as well. So it's that's sometimes a misconception. We just do nothing and everything will be fine. There's something that's not going to happen if you don't intervene. And again, that's if a board chooses to do so. People worry that TIFs diverts money from school districts and other taxing districts. It does not. Particularly, the taxing bodies can pass their budgets. They can achieve the levies that they want. In addition, state law provides that if there are school-age children living in TIF-supported housing, the village is required to make payments from the TIF fund to the school districts up to a cap under state law to help fund the cost to educate those kids. So it's a two-part solution. The taxing bodies get their levy. They pass it, whatever it is, 2% levy increase in the following year. Those revenues still will come to them. And two, the villages are required. So the first dollars out of any TIF dollar from a housing project that's been supported with TIF are held back to give to the schools to pay for the new students if there are some. And the villages can distribute an increment from that TIF fund pro rata back to the taxing district. That's a power they have. They can help fund capital improvements that serve the TIF plan of other taxing bodies if that is a choice they make. So there are various ways to continue to support the other taxing districts. And again, every town that I work with has no interest in seeing the other taxing districts struggle or get worse. The whole system doesn't work if everything isn't healthy. And so you have to be thoughtful and pay attention and make sure that proper engagement occurs between the taxing bodies and that the community as a whole can grow and not damage part of the community through the use of the tool. And the last bit is, is this success necessary or resulting, I should say, dependent on the growth of the tax base? The answer is yes. So if a project, and we've worked on projects where the project doesn't go as far as it would have liked, and there's only so much built of a big plan, that is, that is a limiting feature of the tool. It is a function of the private development success. So you have to make sure that the project can be a success and that it will produce the revenues needed to drive the redevelopment project and the success that the community wants. So there's again, a careful underwriting of those steps to make sure you've got a successful project going forward. The next two slides probably are best together. It's a step function, but it shows how tax revenues work. The blue there on this slide in the lower left is the taxes before a TIF district is created. Those districts are getting the taxes on the land as it stands before the district is put in place. If you could switch to the next slide, please. And then throughout the life of the TIF, the blue remains. So the base taxes, whatever the taxes are that a district is creating, are protected. And insofar as taxes go up, you get into the orange, and the orange is the source of revenue. So again, you see redevelopment or development, taxes go up, and the taxes in the orange universe are diverted to the TIF fund, and that's the source of funds to make things happen. At the end, I think there's one more slide here if I remember right. Well, there isn't, my bad. If you go back, at the end of the life of the TIF, all of that becomes taxable by all the taxing bodies. So at the end of the TIF district, the orange bar there, the last one, is released to the other taxing bodies. And so they see the full tax base relief that they otherwise wouldn't have seen. Again, this is a but-for context. And their tax base grows substantially, which can either lead to additional revenues or a reduction of the tax rates for all of the affected taxing bodies. This is a timeline to set up a TIF district and how it works. It takes a while. I guess there are many steps, and it takes quite a while. We were engaged by the village board to work on a designation in the summer of this year. There's research ongoing, then there's a plan that needs to be constructed. There's a variety of steps that would need to take place. There's a joint review board meeting with affected taxing bodies. There's a public hearing that will presumably occur in this very room. And then the board would take action conceivably in the early part of next year. So it is a long process. I think by design, the state wants people to have a fair chance to understand what's happening and to be able to engage with the process. So this is all essentially statutorily defined, state statute, and the village follows the steps, or any village follows those steps to make sure they do the job properly. But it is not a quick exercise. It is a thoughtful, deliberate process. And once you have the TIF district, you still haven't decided to spend any money. You've decided to create a TIF district. But the decision to spend money is a future decision by the board. That is, again, to fund public infrastructure, to enter into an agreement with the developer, whatever else. Just creating the TIF district creates the tool, gives the opportunity to make those decisions. But without the TIF district, you don't have any money, basically, to do those sorts of things. So it's the first step, or it's the fundamental step in having TIF resources to do redevelopment projects. But that didn't go on too long. I guess there's a last conclusion, but I'm not sure I need to say it. I think I've said those things a couple times. So happy to field questions from the board.
Thanks, Jeff. Any board members have questions for Jeff while he's here?
TIF on residential property, it identifies school districts get paid out, but what about the fire districts, library districts, things like that? Is there a requirement to make distributions to those tax bodies?
There is a requirement for library districts. I should mention it. It's up to 2% of the increment from TIF supported housing, or I think it's $200 per library card holder. So there are very specific rules. The library district would ask the village to make those payments, and the village would not be able to say no. Not that they would. If they say this is the stuff, you got to pay it. The other tax districts, no. So that's part of the ongoing conversation, I think, with other taxing bodies and the effects. Villages have the authority, as I said, to fund a capital improvement. So I won't speculate about how that might work in this context, but if physical facilities need to exist in order to continue to provide appropriate services, I've seen boards entertain those conversations and provide TIF funds to help make those things happen. You can't have a failed community because you don't have the right capital resources. But the operating side, you can, I guess, generally speaking. That's the difference. Operating, you can really only give to schools and libraries.
I have lots of questions that maybe will help the board, ask some of their own. You said earlier, you can use TIF to upfront costs. And so I know the community gets nervous about, a failed TIF or somebody who's extending a TIF, but I assume that if you're funding dollars out of a TIF district upfront, then there's bonds involved, right? So if there's no bonds involved and you have a developer who's upfronting all the costs, there's no increment to front fund expenses.
That's right. So the most common way that communities use TIF in a partnership with a developer is what is called on a pay-as-you-go basis. So that is the approach you're describing, Mary. Is the village or a village agrees, subject to a bunch of conditions and performance and so forth, and the tax is actually existing, to make payments to a developer. That is a very contingent obligation is the term you would use. It's contingent on a bunch of things working out. That is to say, it puts very little risk on a municipality. Some towns will issue bonds and put a lot of risk on themselves, but that's a very rare occasion. And it's usually in a context where the development outcome is, when I've worked on it, it was a single building, the developer was at the table, the construction lender was at the table, like the risk was not as scary as it might be, because it was a site TIF for a single project. And so my client, again, I'm not recommending that, they were comfortable issuing bonds. Most towns say, we're gonna make an agreement, and if things go great, or whatever, however things go, that's the source of incremental taxes available to pay to a developer, or some percentage thereof, or something. So it's not bonds, it's not putting the full faith and credit of the village at risk, generally.
When you've done, did you want to chat about that? When you've helped negotiate a TIF redevelopment agreement, have you done one in such a way, if there is an initial ask and an interest associated with that on that note, that it does expire in 23 years? So in a situation where you have a private investment making infrastructure improvements or what have you, whatever the redevelopment agreement looks like, and there's interest involved, but let's say they don't get paid back within that 23-year time frame, does that, I mean, I would understand that to look like that has to then go to the legislature if you wanted to extend that TIF district, but if you didn't want to as a municipality, do you write that into an agreement to say, you know, in 23 years, whether you're paid back or not, this TIF is gonna expire?
Yeah, so, super fussy technicality, a village cannot issue an obligation for more than 20 years. So
Okay.
whatever you have 23 years for life in the TIF, absolutely, but the commitment initially cannot be for more than 20. And now I'm gonna pretend I'm an attorney, so you can take this for what it's worth, but I don't believe you can tie a future board's hands in that regard completely, like handcuffs. You can say things, you can write things, this board or any board can say whatever they want, but if, lots of towns work exactly the way you described it. They say, here's the deal, you got 20 years, if it pays off, great, if it doesn't, tough beans. That's the normal way deals are made. But to be, conceivably, if a developer came back to a board 18 years from now in another town and said, boy, oh boy, we're not getting there, would you take it to this legislature and ask for an extension and amend the redevelopment agreement? It is possible, I guess, legally. It is, but who knows, like the state law could change, but it can be done, it has been done, I guess I'll say that, but it is exceptional, very exceptional that happens. Because towns say, we did our part, we made a commitment, you, developer, projected some taxes, didn't work out, we got the outcome we wanted, hopefully. You're a developer, you take a risk, we're a village, we don't take risks, so that's on you, essentially. That's generally what I would say, personally,
So I would go back to if a TIF is underwater, it's because it's been bonded, and there's still a debt obligation within that TIF district, and that's typically why someone would go to the legislature to extend a TIF district.
Yeah, towns have done that for sure. They say, boy, oh boy, these bonds are not done yet. They would refinance the bonds and they would get an extension. That is a reason to go to Springfield. You don't have that authority, I guess you're saying that, Mary. This board, as of the law today, could not extend a TIF on its own. So you have to go to Springfield and get the legislature and the governor to vote for it. And that's no easy feat, I guess. But generally, towns get right. They're just like, boy, we're up against it with these bonds. We need more time. And if you have a deal that is at developer's risk, there's obviously a whole lot less of a village need to care. Essentially, that's not your problem exactly.
I know you mentioned earlier you have a list up. I don't know if it's on a slide exactly, and I don't know if it listed every eligible cost, but there was a slide that had TIF eligible costs on there. I just wanted for the community, because we do have quite a large audience this evening and people listening online. If you have a TIF district, well, I will just go back to the Village of Sugar Grove, for example. The village in its past has, obviously we have 2 TIF districts, but has also bonded for infrastructure improvements. And obviously those are bonds that did not go to referendum because we could afford the bond payments. So they're afforded within our budgeting. The village board makes that decision and we can move forward. If they are not afforded within something that we can budget, that's when it goes to referendum, and we're asking the community to approve, in essence, a bond increase. That's what the school has done through their referendum. In this particular case, if we are extending utilities, and we do not use a TIF district on said farmland, because we have quite a lot of farmland in the area that doesn't have utility to it. If we didn't use a TIF district, that's when I feel, and I just want you to correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like that's when we're putting the burden on the taxpayer, because if we bond and we go to referendum for utility improvements, that's something that we're asking the community to pay for, not a private developer. Am I wrong?
I'm a little bit out of my realm, I guess, because I just really work on TIF stuff, I don't work on normal bonds, you know, so that's not really my thing. I don't know how, I guess, if you pass a referendum that includes a tax increase, that is implicit in that
Right.
statement, right?
Yes.
Then I think that's a tax of general applicability, and therefore it's on everybody, is that right?
General obligation.
Right, and so everybody's taxes go up, I think, and again, I'm kind of I don't know, depth here a little bit. TIF, because it is that little map, you know, all of the increment available, first of all, it's not a village general obligation generally, and all the increment, or the source of revenue is the incremental taxes, the diversion of those incremental taxes, so there is not a village-wide tax hike, it's just sort of steering that money into a specific bucket, so I don't know if that answers your question exactly.
It does. I think I'm trying to tell the community, my understanding is obviously we're not looking to put infrastructure on the ground that we're asking all the taxpayers to fund through a bond. We're looking to, in certain areas like TIF 1, whether it be sanitary sewer extension, is to use the TIF districts for those public improvements so that we're not asking our community to fund them. Matt, do you want to chime in on any of that?
No, that's exactly what you're getting at. The ability to bond without having to go to referendum would not increase the taxes. But if you can, that would be increasing the taxes over the entire village.
So in order to activate some of our, I don't want to discount the farmland, I know we love the farmland, but to activate some of it where appropriate, we have this as an option, or we have bonding as an option, or we have, you can only take on so many projects that we can afford to do through, even if it's a general obligation bond, through what we can afford through a payment. Any other, any questions, please feel free, we've got them.
I just have one question. When a TIF ask comes in, does your company go through that TIF ask to see if it's a responsible ask? Or who goes through that, and how is that process completed to make sure that the TIF ask that the TIF ask isn't outside of the actual responsible ask? Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
All right.
Yeah, so that is another function that we serve, absolutely. And so we, for lots of towns, help do that. Towns don't look at private sector performance very often. And so we evaluate the assumptions by the developer for their reasonableness against market benchmarks that we know from sources or clients or whatever, a variety of ways to make sure that but-for is met, essentially. There's a bunch of technical issues. Are the eligible costs good? When are the taxes likely to show up? But that's a function we serve to, again, make communities comfortable that somebody who's not working with a developer, who understands how those numbers work, has looked at them, that they're reasonable and that it is necessary and to provide this assistance. And then again, working with staff and everybody else, how do we do that in a way that is the least risky for the village? That's always the goal, is how can we just tip this thing across the line from no to yes and keep the village as far out of it as possible. So that's, in the course of doing the analysis of the performance that you're describing, you figure out essentially what is the issue here exactly. How do we try to structure the assistance that will get the deal done but keep us, like municipality, as far out of the risk as we can.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I had a quick question, just a clarification between the 20 years and the 23 years.
Mhm.
So how long is it, will they, have the TIF? So you
Mm-hmm.
corrected, yeah, that's, you were
Sure.
corrected, and said 20 years.
Yeah, so the districts last 23 years by statute. But an obligation cannot, like it'd be a TIF note or a bond. So when you issue a financial obligation, a municipality does that, it can only be for 20 years. Now, so normally, I think, I don't really know the whole legislative history, it often takes a year or two to get the increment going, if that makes sense. And so a 23-year TIF might only have 21 years of money, if that makes sense. So, it's not as far apart as 3 years generally. I think that's the reason that the legislature kind of gave room for, I think it's actually capitalized interest, 3 years of cap I, sort of a normal structure in a bond deal. But that's, again, most people don't do bond deals, most towns. So there's 23 years of increment theoretically. But the taxes gotta go up in year one, and they often don't.
Okay.
I'm gonna jump in again. You have another question? Okay. So Matt can attest that I run a lot of things through my brain, and then I usually bounce them off him, and then sometimes we'll bounce them off you, and that's when you might tell me I'm crazy. But one of the things that we was thinking about, and I ran it by Matt, but the idea that if you have a TIF district and you're getting your redevelopment agreement paid off, right? So let's say we got the redevelopment agreement paid off for anything that we're obligated to in 12 years,
Sure.
okay? We still know that there's 23 years left, and the increment between year 12 and 23 is still growing within the TIF district. But yet there's still expenses that maybe weren't obligated to the developer.
Mhm.
So we know that there would be expenses that we would need to hold back on in order to facilitate any of those, things that weren't taken care of. My thought was, and I don't know how often you see this, but if a developer is paid off, the obligation is taken care of, but the TIF still has years left on for increment to grow. How often do you see, my understanding from that is it's possible and it's not that difficult to cut properties out of the TIF district so that you're engaging those and they become part of the regular tax rolls for everyone else. How often does it happen? Is it easy to do?
I've not seen it happen a lot, but
Okay.
it is easy to do. So, imagine you've got a 10 parcel TIF district. You need to keep the TIF in place, I think, to your hypothetical, because we still need revenue to still do probably public projects, I think was the way what you were contemplating. But the 10th parcel, you can release it. It's easy. The standard in the law, and again, it's quasi-legal, so just take it with a grain of sand, or salt, sand, good grief. A minor amendment, a village can pass an ordinance and the parcel's out. And then that tax base goes back to all the taxing bodies, pretty easy. So it's very easy to do, it doesn't happen a lot, I don't know why. I'm thinking of this project, I'm working for a community, there was a discussion, whatever, sometimes it does, but it's certainly within the board's power. I think more commonly, they'll surplus the money out and keep the TIF whole. So you can leave the parcels in and just give back, whatever, let's imagine you're getting $5 million a year in increment. You can just send the million back to the county and they send it back to the taxing body. So it's even easier to just send the money back and not release the tax base.
Okay, that brings my next question.
Mm-hmm.
So when you release the money in a surplus, because we've done that through the other TIF districts,
Mhm.
it's my understanding that we're releasing surplus dollars. I call it bonus money, because whatever their levy is, they're still getting their levy from the frozen TIF district and then everyone else. So in order to help offset the burden of the levy that is spread through everyone else, my thought would be that you would want to release them. If you don't need the revenue, or you are at least projecting out to say, these businesses, these homes, these whatever they may be, are gonna produce enough increment over time because we analyze the pro forma, it's performing the way we think it's going to offset those future expenses, to keep that going. But at the same time, if we're able to cut properties out of the TIF district that are not needed any longer because the redevelopment agreement is being paid, then that helps offset the entire tax base versus the extra funds or extra funds. So they're still getting their obligation through their tax bill and their levy ask, but once we release those funds, it's extra money versus the understanding of cutting the property out and it becoming part of the tax rolls. The tax base.
Tax base, I think mechanically it's similar. To get into the minutia of levies and new EAV, I believe what would happen is if you were going to release a property, you would notify any released EAV, wherever that chart was, the incremental bit, is treated like new EAV, new construction EAV. So it's outside of tax caps. So that orange bit, at the moment of release, there has to be communication between the village and the other taxing bodies, and they can grab that new EAV, and that's not subject to the tax cap. It's not subject to PTEL. And so you can grow more than the CPI limits of PTEL. So you being another taxing body or the village, can grow your budget at something more than PTEL would allow. So that's, I don't know if that quite gets to your point, but surplusing the cash, one point I think you were making was, it's additional revenue beyond the levy, and that is true. So if a board of another taxing body grows their levy by the statutory maximum, and then the village elects to surplus out whatever, $100,000 that ends up in that taxing body's pocket, they would get their levy plus $100,000. So they could reduce their levy, or they could do a special project or whatever. But again, it's part of the communication between taxing bodies. It's part of the making sure we work together. Everybody works together to see everything go as well as it can. Essentially, you want to make sure that because there's some technicalities, I guess. That make my long rambling answer.
No.
And you want to make sure that it is handled appropriately to optimize the outcomes for everybody. Essentially.
I like to be optimistic, but in some regard, and realistic, but how often have you seen municipalities working with other taxing bodies? I know you can't write a contract on this because you don't know what the growth is gonna be, but let's say you're growing, the increment within the TIF district is to go to the other taxing bodies and say, listen, we know we can surplus because we know what's in here, we know what's coming and being paid in property taxes. If we can surplus X, Y, Z, can you freeze your levy so that you're getting what your levy request would be if you did a 2.5% increase, and then maybe exceed that? So that's another, maybe that's my optimistic brain to think that another taxing body might say, yeah, we can freeze our levy if you're gonna give us more than what our levy request would be and then some. Do you ever see that?
I've not participated in those discussions with other taxing bodies. I don't know quite what happens exactly, but what you described could definitely happen. It's just a question of, does it happen? I don't know. It's definitely within the power of the other taxing body to decide. If they know they're going to get a check, they cannot levy as much tax. That's absolutely within their control. Again, I know that taxing bodies tend to over levy in order to make sure they hit the tax cap. And so, the finer points of how do you calibrate your over levy to not over levy quite so much, it seems hard to me, but I'm not a finance director, so.
Okay, and I can never figure out the school board and the school body, the taxing body there with their levy, and I've asked Matt, I'm like, Matt, you gotta help me figure that out, but, the school district, let's say the school district did freeze their tax levy, they're able, it's my understanding that they're able to actually recapture. They're one of the only taxing bodies that can recapture that increment at a later date, whereas the municipality, am I wrong? Do you understand what I'm saying?
I understand, I don't know the school districts enough to know.
I didn't know if you did.
I've not heard that. No, that was
Okay.
interesting.
Okay.
I don't know that.
So
It is, school finance is very hard, and I don't know much about it. There's state aid and stuff, so I don't know.
Okay, fair enough. Any other questions?
Yeah, just to clarify, sorry, brings up fire. The way that the TIF works, you said dollar for dollar. So if a developer is not receiving funds until that money is made into the TIF fund, whereas if we bonded, then we would upfront the cost and the developer would get that money ahead of time, and regardless of how the project goes, the developer receives the money back.
That's exactly right.
That's-
That is the structure that is very uncommon because of the risk on the municipalities. That's exactly right. So a developer would be conceptually counting on those orange bars going up. And if the orange bars go up, they get paid less. That's a pay-as-you-go deal. If a village issues a bond and puts a GO back on it, and those orange bars aren't as big as that chart says, you still gotta pay the bonds. And so then the risk shifts to the municipality. And that is, it happens, but it's very rare because towns don't like to take that kind of risk. And I
Is
understand.
that the big issue in Cook County? Do you know, I know that they have a lot of issues with the way that they operate their courts. Is that a bond issue with them? Is that why? Because that's the whole state looks at TIF, and they always use Cook County and Chicago as the example of TIFs. And I guess if it's a dollar for dollar, in my mind, if you don't make it, you don't get it.
Right.
Less issue. So I guess, do you know that question, the answer to that question?
The places that I've seen TIF bonds, that I've heard of TIF bonds not working, I won't name towns, but they're in the suburbs. The city's got a different way to do things just because they're gigantic and they do stuff differently. I don't think they do geo bonds for economic development. I haven't worked on bond deals with the city, so I don't know everything they do. But I've heard of villages and suburban cities do the hard thing, this geo bond, take all that risk to try to do a really hard project. So they're doing it for a good reason. I'm not judging them. I'm sure they thought about it real hard. They're not clueless. And things don't go quite the way projections go. There's this town with a sports stadium in it, I believe, that is facing those challenges most famously in the paper. What's it called? Bridgeview, or what it's called, with the soccer stadium. We don't work for Bridgeview, so I don't know the story there, and I'm sure everybody was trying their best, but I I think that is, the bad thing that's happened, I think they have to raise taxes on every taxpayer to pay for that stadium, so that's the thing most towns try to avoid.
All right, thank you.
Any other board questions? We're gonna ask Matt, because we talk about this a lot. Do you have anything that is just food for thought that would be good for the community to hear that maybe we're missing or haven't discussed? While we have Jeff.
I don't think so. I think the biggest point is knowing that the pay-as-you-go is what the village has done in the past. And it also is the way to make sure that the village is at the least amount of risk. If a development doesn't go, they make no money. The money's not there to pay anything back. So that shifts all the risk away from the village. And I think that's the biggest focus. What we've done on TIF 1 and 2 still is always a pay-as-you-go. It's never been a bonding option, so.
Thank you. Any other? It's not, unfortunately, it's not for, it's a board discussion, I'm sorry. But this will not be the last TIF discussion that we have. Like we said, Jeff works for SB Freeman. He is a hired consultant for the Village of Sugar Grove. He is leading the effort through this process for us, and he is working on the analysis to see if it does qualify for that but-for. So that is what he is doing. And you are free to email us your questions if you have questions. And so the next time that we have Jeff back in the room, we can put those questions to paper. Obviously, when we have public hearings regarding TIF, there will be opportunity to ask questions as well. But this was just like kind of a one-on-one for the board. But thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you. Airport report.
No report.
Oh, thank you, Tony. Okay, up next, we have public comment on items specifically scheduled for action.
So this evening on the agenda, under consent agenda, we have A, approval of the minutes of September 5th, 2023 village board meeting. B, approval of the vouchers. C, approval of the treasurer's report. D, approval, acceptance of the April 30th, 2023 annual comprehensive financial report. E, a resolution authorizing public services agreement for Illinois 47 and Park Avenue intersection improvements concept study. F, an ordinance amending the village code title 11 zoning regulations for off-street parking. Under general business this evening, we have A, a resolution honorary street sign for Lisa Campisi. B, a resolution adopting an emergency interim succession plan and electing a president pro tem and temporary chairman. C, a resolution authorizing execution of an agreement with Crayons, Strategies LLC for communication services. D, an ordinance amending the village code Title II, boards and commissions, public hearing rules and procedures. Those are all, actually, it's our entire agenda this evening. But I just want public comment at this time. We don't have any discussion items, is my point. But just public comment at this time for any.
It's starting.
Solar.
It's there. I'm sorry, I apologize. I didn't look at page 2. So those are the items up for public comment at this time. So I will call public comment. There's TIF questions. I see people who have TIF, so if you have a TIF question, I will call your name, and if it's relative to TIF, we will take notes if you want to ask that question under the second public comment. So I have a Thomas Fezzi. Is this a TIF question, sir? Or is it relative to the agenda items we're voting on?
No, it's not.
Okay. You will go first in the next section, I'm sorry. Bob? Same, okay. Dave Pollock?
It can wait for public comment.
Thank you. Lisa Essling?
Same thing.
Okay. Dale Essling?
Same way.
Okay. Jackie Ellison?
Same way.
Okay. I have an Amy. Okay, I'm sorry, Imerman.
Okay.
Second, okay. Jim Martyr? Same. Doug and Christine. Doug and Christine might have left. Jaden? Okay. Donna Baughman? Same. Okay, that's everyone on my list.
Do I have anyone that has any public comment at this time for any of the items scheduled for action? So anything under the consent agenda or anything under general business? Hearing none, I will close that portion of public comment. Up next is the consent agenda. Any request to remove an item? Hearing none, can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda as previously stated?
So make that motion. I'll second.
Okay, I got a first out of trustee Heron and a second out of trustee Michaels. Roll call, please, Allison.
Trustee Brooks. Trustee Heron.
Aye.
Trustee Michaels.
Aye.
Trustee Bonnie.
Aye.
Trustee Lindy.
Aye.
Motion passes, thank you. Up next, under general business, we have a resolution for an honorary street sign for Lisa Campese. Brad. No, pull it. Think I did it, okay. So I just want to let the community who may or may, I have that, sorry, who may or may not be aware, at our last village board meeting, we approved an honorary street program. So, and then there's parameters involved with it, so many a year and how often we do it. So I don't know, they don't have them on the top of mind, I don't know if you know. I think we finalized 3 a year, right, with a cap. And I was asking Scott today, and I couldn't remember what our cap was. So our first, this is the approval of to approve a street sign at the location of Esker for Lisa Campese.
Esker Drive is the road that the middle school is on, where Lisa worked. And
Can you
really,
read the list? Here. This is some of it. We're gonna do a proclamation, when we actually hang the sign.
the list of under K.
Those are some of the things that she did.
The qualifications?
Yes.
Okay. She organized the holiday spirit, helped establish Snowflake. Operation Snowflake is a leadership organization which focuses on kindness, ownership, respect, trustworthiness, and building leadership in middle school students. Lisa helped establish Hope Junior, a peer mentoring program for students with special needs. She organized meals for families in need, organized therapy dogs to visit schools, served on district-wide committee to develop protocols for students experiencing mental health crisis. Organized tours for 5th grade special education students to aid in the transition to middle school. Organized trips with middle school students to read to elementary school age students. Taught executive functioning and social skills lessons to 6th grade classrooms. Helped with the organization of different themed weeks throughout the school year. Student Appreciation Week, Self-Awareness Week are a couple of examples. For the elementary school in town, she was a Girl Scout leader, cheerleading coach, choreographed dance routine for halftime shows during teacher versus 5th grade basketball game at John Shields, organized holiday spirit, stop, walk, talk, a bully prevention program. It went to training and brought it back to Canelan. She went to the training and brought it back to Canelan, where it's still implemented today at the elementary school level, at all of the elementary schools. Organized support for students that needed an adult mentor, and organized recess groups to help kids with socialization. And that's a short list of a lot of the stuff that she was involved with.
She also worked at,
2 of the 4 elementary schools, and the middle school for a long time. I worked with her at McDowell and told her she was crazy for going to the middle school. Took me 10 years, but now I'm at the middle school. So just everybody knows her throughout the district.
I'm sorry.
So with your approval, will it sign? What about the later date in the fall when it arrives?
We're trying to coordinate a date with the middle school as they want to plant a tree
And so we want to make it an event for her. So, if there's any other discussion or questions, I'd ask for a motion to approve Lisa Campese as our first honorary sign.
Motion is made.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Trustee Bonnie?
Yes.
Trustee Heron?
Aye.
Trustee Lindy?
Aye.
Trustee Michaels?
Aye.
Thank you, motion passes.
Okay, up next, we have a resolution adopting an emergency interim succession plan and electing a president pro tem and temporary chairperson. So you.
Allison.
Allison, thank you, Allison.
So, a couple of years ago, the village board amended the village code under, section 164, President Pro Tem, to formally designate a line of succession, as allowed for in state statute. At that time, it was determined that it would be based upon the length of time of continuous, uninterrupted service on the village board, and it was to be set by resolution following each election. So this is just, it wasn't done after the April election and the May swearing in. So this resolution just clarifies that and sets the new line of succession based on the changes on the board.
Thank you, Allison. Any questions?
Chief, does the president pro tem, do they need to attend a NIMS training course for public disasters?
They do, and as well as every board member does, there's our classes everyone, we're gonna be asking to make sure that they participate in. So, but the different levels will be, hopefully, obtained by the president pro tem.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, hearing none, can I get a motion to approve item B, the resolution as previously stated?
Stated.
Second.
I have first out of trustee Bonnie and a second out of trustee Heron. Roll call, please.
Trustee Bonnie?
Aye.
Trustee Heron?
Aye.
Trustee Michaels?
Aye.
Trustee Lindy?
Aye.
Up next, thank you, motion passes, everyone. Up next, we have a resolution authorizing the execution of an agreement with France Strategies. Scott?
So at the last meeting, there was a discussion with the village board about bringing on a communications firm to help out delivering information to the public. I met with and interviewed a couple of different firms and did some research on firms in the area. The best interview that I had by far was with Krantz Strategies, with Meredith Krantz. She is a resident of the village. She has 15 years of experience in government relations and also has done some other great work with the Live Golf Tour. So I've asked her to provide us a contract for service, and Meredith's here, if you can come up to the mic, and if there's any questions for Meredith from the village board, she'd be happy to answer. I'd be also happy to answer any questions on the process or what we plan to do.
Excellent. Thank you, Scott. So good evening. I want to just start by expressing my gratitude to Village President Conan, the esteemed Board of Trustees here, and staff for your consideration of my proposal to deliver communications and community engagement within the Village of Sugar Grove. So my expertise, as Scott mentioned, draws from 15 years of communications leadership, including work with the Illinois House of Representatives, Illinois Department of Transportation, the Department of Human Services, and the Illinois Tollway. As a resident of Sugar Grove, I'm personally committed to contributing to the success of our community. And the plan provides a comprehensive range of communications approaches, and I believe my goals align seamlessly with the village. And that is to ensure that residents are well informed, engaged, and empowered to actively participate in the growth and development of our community. I look forward to collaborating with you and welcome the chance to answer any questions or share any additional insights. So thank you.
Thank you, Meredith.
Any questions?
Currently, the village pretty much just sends out email blasts and posts things on Facebook. What are some of the other avenues that you reach out to the community?
Yeah, I think just having an active presence and being able to have conversations between village leadership and the community, and just being open to those opportunities, whether it's digitally, using social media, through the website, through public events, through community events, and stakeholder coordination within the village, and just looking for those opportunities to continue to have that level of open dialogue.
I think part of it too, before, there used to be a newsletter, right, that went out in collaboration with the other taxing bodies that, I wanna say about 2 years ago, maybe more. I think the township still does something, but it was, that we were part of that.
Yeah, library.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So I guess, you know, that was an avenue that was explored, and maybe what you can bring is, you know, I feel like I don't feel like, I know that we have an aging demographic, and not everybody is on social media, which is part of the concern, that we're not necessarily getting our messages out, and serving the public to the best of our ability, so we're gonna need your help, to do that, and I still talk to residents that get a newspaper, and they're not reading it online, so maybe it is more mailing. I mean, obviously, your services don't cover that, so we'd have to, you know, budget appropriately, but, hopefully those are things you can work through with us.
Absolutely. Taking a look at the community and just the, you know, meet the community members where they're at. So we'll take a comprehensive look and work together on a plan to address that.
Scott, in your memo last week, or 2 weeks ago, you talked about a list of projects that we're gonna communicate. Do you have a list developed?
Yeah, so first and foremost is the expectation of an agreement, zoning, TIF, potentially all that coming through with the, Sugar Grove LLC, the Crown Project is the biggest one. There's gonna be a lot of information, there's gonna be multiple hearings that come up. Wanna make sure that the public is as aware as possible of those. That's the biggest project that we have on the horizon. We also have other ones coming up down the pipe, and hopefully some good successes like Burnt Barrel that happened. We want to share when those come in. We wanted to do a better job as the village with Live happening this weekend to be able to focus on and announce some other projects. So as things come up in the fall, the tree lighting, different things that we do in the community that maybe some new residents may not know about, and different things that we've got out there. We're going to try to focus on those too. It's not just strictly for development projects, but other restaurants that might happen, other changes with businesses, other things we can highlight. If there's a economic development visit by myself or Michael or President Conan, we want to highlight that and maybe showcase that business and different things like that. There's a lot of opportunities to get more information out about the things that we're doing.
I think there's things too, just like, I always say, I want to call it a facade program, but Danny, somebody tell me.
Commercial property.
Beautification. Commercial property enhancement program. That's something that, I don't think people were aware that we even had until we, gave out our first grant. And then once we gave out that grant, then people became aware. So that is a success. I consider that a success for the village, and that should be shared through a PR firm.
Yeah, I haven't seen anything on the 50/50 Parkway tree program that needs to be promoted. It's probably too late for this season, but things like that. I really haven't seen much on Live from the village website. So we need to communicate with the residents.
Absolutely. And hopefully we can learn some things from Meredith along the way that we can take into the future and use even for years to come.
Allison, I don't know. I feel like we've been putting the Live stuff out there, but I could be wrong. I know Chief, we just talked about the sign on 47 as well. I know we have digital signs out, right, Brad?
They're up.
88
They're
has.
up. Oh, well, yeah, they're up.
Tollway has signs out.
Nothing on Bliss Road or 47, I haven't seen anything that identify the Live for the community.
But yeah, I think that this hiring, Cranes, all right, all right, hiring you to do this helps us be consistent with everything from Live, with things going, projects going on, whatever, it might be road closures, whatever. It's just a very consistent, the school districts started to do it, and it's one person setting out, communicating in the same ways. And I think that consistency is gonna really help. I really am looking forward to this.
I think last year too, relative to Live, there was road closure. So we had our signs out early because Dugan Road was being closed, so we were utilizing those signs for that. Whereas this year, my understanding is Dugan Road is not being closed.
Correct, we are not closing, but then just, Corner will be closed, but no.
So, do the daily stuff and having
Coming
somebody.
from different people.
Yeah, having them so
Interpreting
focused.
different from us. So.
Any other questions or discussion? Okay, thank you, Meredith. Hearing none, can I get a motion to approve item C, the resolution as previously stated?
So,
Can I get a second?
Second.
We have first on trustee Heron, and the second on trustee Bonnie. Roll call, please.
Trustee Heron.
aye.
Trustee Bonnie.
Aye.
Trustee Lindy.
Aye.
Trustee Michaels.
Thank you. Motion passes. Up next, we have an ordinance amending the Village Code Title II Board and Commissions, Public Hearing Rules and Procedures. Walter.
At the last board meeting, the board discussed the proposed rules and procedures. Most of the discussion centered on the allocation of time to impacted parties. That's defined in the proposed rules. I believe we've incorporated the desires of the board with respect to that. So we added a time limit on presentations given by impacted parties during the public hearing. And the time limit applies only to the impacted parties presentation during the public hearing. It has no bearing on the cross-examination opportunity that the impacted parties have under the proposed rules. So I guess I submitted to you the proposed rules and procedures for public hearings for the village.
Thank you, Walter. Did everybody obviously have a look over the language under item 4 specifically that I feel like we kind of labored over last time, and see if it's still redlined on page 25 of your packet? Any question or discussion relative to that?
I thought the discussion we had at the last meeting about impacted parties, I didn't think we were gonna limit it to just 10 minutes. There's a lot of discussion going on. I don't remember a time frame coming up. And the point was that we encourage the impacted parties to work together, but it would be difficult. And then it says that they're only allowed to speak one time unless the chairman determines they're allowed to speak more.
I think I have very clear recollection of the 10 minutes. I'm not sure about the other board
Yes.
members.
10 minutes, if you want to, I'm sure it's on the recording.
Okay.
On the discussion, 10 minutes was discussed, and I believe that's just for the presentation. And if they do work together, then their presentation would be as long as the presenter's, petitioner's presentation. But this would allow, if you had 5 impacted parties and they wanted to do 5 different presentations, that's just, 10 minutes each.
And those same impacted parties have the ability to cross-examine
Right.
as well.
Which
And
is-
they also have an ability, I'm sorry, Heidi, they also have the ability under public comment as well.
Absolutely, and the cross-examination, the 10 minutes, that cross-examination is not included in that 10 minutes. 10 minutes is just the presentation.
Correct. That's my understanding.
That's how I understand it.
Per person. Yes.
There was also, there's also a concern if the presenter was, the petitioner was brief, that the impacted parties would not have enough time. This way, each impacted party can have up to 10 minutes, even if the petitioner only spent 5 minutes. So we didn't want to, we were hesitant to base it just completely off of the petitioner's time frame, because in the event that the petitioner was brief, we still wanted to give an opportunity to the impacted parties. But there still is the need to conduct business at the planning commission if there are a lot of impacted parties that need to get through the hearing. And 10 was what was offered around by the village board that night. And we discussed it a lot on a staff level on what can be done. And that's a pretty good amount of time. With the knowing that there's also public comment and the ability to cross-examine. So that's why that was lined up.
I have one question. Coming off of that, if the presenter was brief and was less than 10 minutes and you had collectively one person, then are they only limited in the way this is phrased to the amount of time that the presenter has? Because it says, if they agree upon one speaker to represent as
would say they're the individual, they would be an individual.
That would be an individual. Okay, I just didn't wanna, you know.
I get it, yeah, because otherwise it would be collaborating with themselves to represent themselves
Right,
versus
right,
just
so-
an individual.
The way I interpret it is if there's one person, if there's one impacted party, they can either have 10 minutes or as long as the
Okay.
petitioner took, whatever they chose to take as their time limit.
That's what I just wanted to, there would be a minimum of 10 minutes.
Yes, that's my
Do
understanding.
you think it should be longer, Sean, or?
No, I honestly, I didn't remember, coming up with the timeframe, so, if it was discussed 10 minutes, that's fine. I do remember talking about having, impacted people or, petitioners petition, so they could submit their presentation and report information on to it. So 5 days was what was determined by staff for submittal.
And I think that's to give anyone who might be testifying or what the questions are, time to answer the question. You know, it's not productive to get into a public hearing and have somebody ask you a question that you're not prepared for, or you need to pull data or something, so that's why that's like that. Any other questions or discussions on what's in front of you as it has been amended again? Hearing none, can I get a motion to approve item D, the ordinance as previously stated?
So moved. Second.
The first on trustee Harron, and the second on trustee Bonnie. Roll call, please.
Trustee Harron?
Aye.
Trustee Bonnie?
Aye.
Trustee Michaels?
Aye.
Trustee Lindy?
Aye.
Thank you, motion passes. Thank you, Walter. Up next, we have public comment, for any and all items. I'm gonna go back to my list first, and, we will be taking, are you taking your pause? I was gonna say, I'm gonna take notes, and I know he does too, just relative to any questions specifically that you all might be having. So, Thomas, you are up first.
Thank you. My name is Tom Feasy. I'm a resident of Sugar Grove. I'm a practicing attorney. My practice is concentrated in real estate. I've had an opportunity to review a TIF eligibility study that was provided to all of you, I believe, last November. And the conclusion of this is it's found that the area, the Crown Development area is what I'm referring to, contains conditions that could qualify as a blighted area as it meets one of the standalone eligibility criteria for vacant land, which is that the sound growth of the area is impaired by the fact that the property is subject to chronic flooding. State statute has very specific requirements as to what is eligible for a TIF and what is not. There's one thing that they omitted in their conclusion here, and there's another component to that. And that is that this area of chronic flooding, the alleged blighted area, must be reasonably distributed throughout the vacant part of the redevelopment project area to which it pertains. As per this study, only 6.8% of the subject property is encumbered by floodplain, and that's 52.9 acres out of a total of 792 acres. Based on my reading of this report and my understanding of the state statute, I would contend that the Crown Development property is not eligible for a TIF.
Thank you, sir. Up next, I have Bob.
My name is Bob Romani, Blackberry Township, he cut Paramount, so have to truncate mine a smidge. But anyway, again, it was the validity of the TIF for this project for Crown, basically due to the amount of blighted property. Again, it's only the creek zone, which is actually partial natural wetlands due, as determined by Kane DuPage Soil and Water. So, Crown has owned this property for 20 plus years. This property was extensively flooded back in '92 when the whole area got flooded. Crown knew this when they bought the property, this was an issue with the property. And per Kane County, any of the waterways that cut through your own property, you're to maintain them in a flowable condition. Crown has never done anything with any of this property. They've let it degrade, they've let the tree falls into it, everything else, the beaver work, anything else that happened to it has basically been ignored by Crown. So in the grand scheme of things, Crown has created their own TIF conditions to meet the state's items. Plus the fact that 322 of those acres are on the opposite side of the tollway. So why would this be included in the TIF when all the supposed blighted area is south of the tollway? I think that covered most of the stuff. I mean, Crown's got very deep pockets. They've owned this property for this length of this 20 plus years right now. They've always intended to build on it. So they knew they were gonna have to do something with it. But right now what they're gonna do with the TIF is throw the burden back to the taxpayers. We're the people of Sugar Grove, since I'm Blackberry Township, I don't have to pay that. But in the grand scheme of things, if you guys annex us, then we still got the same issues. We're still dealing with fire department, which is gonna be right across from my house when they put in the new fire station for Elburn. So that's gonna be servicing you people on the north side of the road. All that money that's supposedly would come from the TIF will not be available to them until much later. So again, I don't see where the validity of Crown being able to get this TIF at this point.
Thank you, Bob. Dave Pollock.
Good evening, everybody. Regarding the TIF and the proposed Crown development, my ask is that you wait. Many key financial experts like Warren Buffett, Charles Payne, Kevin O'Leary, and Jim Cramer have all said there's a huge financial bubble coming. They have warned that the current financial situation with rising interest rates, increased building vacancies, will destroy commercial real estate. They also have said the impact on small banks who are already facing issues will be the next to fail. All I ask is that we wait and see what happens in the next national election. That will definitely impact the future of our country. This development will impact not only those who live in town, but surrounding communities. This is impacting people's lives, livelihoods, and way of life. We cannot show disregard for our neighbors or the people that live in the townships that surround us. This is reckless. If you truly mean what you say in being objective, listening to people, and making informed decisions, put this issue on a referendum for the next election. Let the people who represent, or you represent, have a say in their futures. Let the people who live in the townships also have a say in whether or not you can impact their lives. You represent us, you were elected by us, now let us have a say in how we want the village to move forward. Please put this issue on the ballot and follow whatever the outcome may be. Thank you.
Thank you. Lisa Essling.
Lisa Essling, Blackberry Township. At the last board meeting, I asked how the board and the zoning committee can rectify the obvious conflict between the 4 required zoning standards that are used to determine the eligibility of rezoning on every property in the village, and the planned rezoning of Crown property that does not meet even one of the standards. I read the standards, showed you how, when applied to the Crown property, Crown failed on all of them. Then I referred specifically to the last one, which said that rezoning could not change the character of the property, and also referred to a letter from Sean Michaels to the tollway, where he plainly said that development would change the character of the area. Has there been any discussion on this that can rectify that conflict? Has there been any discussion, or do I not?
I'm sorry, we're not addressing.
Okay.
Did we not start the timer? I'm just, it's okay. You get another 3 minutes. That's what happens.
And I practiced to get it under 3. My second comment is regards to something that was said by President Conan last night at the ethics hearing, and it's not in regards to any of the charges or findings of the alleged ethics violation. I'm not going to. President Conan said that we, Thoughtful Progress, have been sharing lies and misinformation whose only intent was to create chaos and scare people. I can't remember the exact words, but it's something to that effect. I would like to request some sort of a list of these lies, etc., so we can address them, because that's not our intent. President Conan was brought to tears over fear for herself being unsafe. We who are having our homes and communities destroyed have been enduring the same fear of feeling unsafe that we're still gonna have our homes. We fight boldly and fiercely, but have made a conscious effort to base our allegations on researched facts and FOIA documents. When someone in our group misspoke or was out of line, the offending posts were removed on social media with some sort of apology and or a statement saying they would refrain from such posts, like personal attacks. And we agree with you that shall not be there. And those things are changed. Please, instead of making sweeping generalizations, which are never completely true, that everything is, lies and misinformation, let us know where you believe we have failed. We can either apologize or we can show proof for our statements and just put this finger pointing to rest. And I would like to have my words written word for word in the minutes. And so I'm going to give you this copy, and I've included my personal email address so that if you guys can list some of those and send it to us, we can address them. And I can get it to any of the admins who I honestly don't know who they are because plausible deniability. I don't want to know the admins of the sites, but I'll pass it to somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody. So who do I give this to?
You can give it to us, but I just want to let you be aware that that's not how we keep our minutes. We have a digital recording, we have an audio recording. I know there's people who are recording here tonight. She keeps the minutes so that she does not have opinion or misguided in your interpretation of what someone's trying to say. So we don't post. Our minutes are just what they are. That's policy of the board, and it's the way they've been doing it.
Can I still give it to you from my email address?
100%.
Okay, because I didn't want to say that.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Dale Essling.
My name is Dale Essling. It may seem a little bit off topic. When my son was 12, he was on a blood thinner. He got sick and we gave him a prescription. Before we did that, we asked, will this affect his PT levels in his blood? They told us no. We gave him the prescription and his blood PT went out the ceiling because it didn't affect his PT directly. It affected the medicine that affected his PT. So Friedman's slides up here where they said, will the TIF affect taxes? The TIF itself will not affect taxes. But indirectly, just like Ian's medicine, it will affect taxes later because anybody in this room isn't going to live on their today's wages for 20 years. Neither is the taxing body going to live on those wages for 20 years if they're frozen. They're going to raise taxes, and who's going to pay the taxes is going to be the taxpayer. And I think everybody needs to do a little investigating on TIFs before this gets passed. Thank you.
Thank you. Jackie Ellison.
I will also be giving Allison a copy of my notes. Honorable Village President Cohen and esteemed village trustees, my name is Jackie Ellison, and I come before you today in my capacity as a concerned mother residing in beautiful Blackberry Township. I would like to underscore a pertinent statistic pertaining to 51 active TIFs in Kane County. An examination of the 2021 TIF report from Aurora and Carpentersville reveals that 69% of TIF funds were directed towards interest payments to bonds and financial institutions. Again, 69% was given to corporate interest. I'm aware of the numerous discussions surrounding land acquisition over the past year, and my concern as a mother of 2 young children within the school district is that the Village of Sugar Grove may include land acquisition within the framework of the TIF district, effectively erasing tax revenue. I respectfully request your commitment that such an outcome will be averted, particularly in light of the ongoing situation in Aurora with the relocation of the Hollywood Casino to the Outlet Mall and the $68 million TIF district which is being proposed there too. Given the anticipated influx of 1,500 residential homes per the Gross website, it prompts the question of which elementary school will be equipped to accommodate this surge in student enrollment. I implore you to clarify the measures in place to address the challenge in the event of a TIF district establishment, ensuring that our children continue to receive the high-quality education we have come to value and appreciate. Furthermore, I raise concerns about the impact of increased air traffic over Harder Middle School, arising from the operation of larger aircraft such as 747s and 777s at the Aurora Airport for international cargo transportation. These aircraft are associated with significant noise emission. How does the district plan to mitigate the impact of this heightened air traffic on Harder Middle School and its sporting events when they do not have additional funding from the 1,500 residential units? It is essential to recognize that the primary burden of this TIF would fall on the shoulders of children who do not reside in Sugar Grove. I implore you to consider the implications of such actions on the Keeneland community and its children. It is my firm belief that TIFs inadvertently divert funds away from education, ultimately benefiting affluent corporations and weakening our education system. In closing, I kindly request that Trustee Heron abstain from voting on the TIF district. I fear a vote in favor of the TIF district, which could adversely affect children in neighboring towns, may tarnish the respect you have garnered within the Keeneland community. I thank each of you for...
Thank you. I'm sorry, Jackie. Thank you.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you. Amy. Raise your hand.
Hi, my name is Amy Edelman. I'm a Sugar Grove resident, and I just had a question for consideration. When we listened to the presentation about TIFs tonight, several times it was mentioned that it was very important when considering TIF districts to determine the high probability of success of the project. So my question for further discussion at another time or answer at another time is, what exercises, projections, or processes are used or will you use to determine the success of this project when you don't know who the end users will be? Thank you.
Thank you. Jim.
Thank you. My name is Jim Martyr. I do live in the village of Oswego, so I was asked by a resident here to kind of give you an example of a TIF district that we had in Oswego. And I think it fits right in with some of the folks that just spoke. So we had a TIF district passed, I believe it was back in 2014, 2015. And I'll just give you my perspective of the net summary of that. So we incurred an additional $30 million in debt, which we still have. We got a nice, brand new, large building, which I affectionately call the Monstrosity in downtown Oswego, which was built about 4 years ago. It's mostly full now. We still have a lot of open stuff in it. And the second half of that development for that TIF district hasn't started on time. They're actually in default of the agreement. Nothing's happened to check them in that, as well as the taxing body, the village, decided to purchase a property for $1.5 million, which was on the market at taxpayers' expense, gave it to the developer as part of the deal, and effectively gave the developer $23 million of our taxpayer money. So, and my point isn't that I don't know anyone here, I'm not accusing anyone of anything here, is that, the residents are represented by the village. There's nothing you can't do without a TIF district by making the developer pay full impact fees, making the developer invest in the area and do things properly. I'm pro-growth, I'm pro-development, but I'm also pro-taxpayer. And I just wanted to share that example with you as something that you might want to consider, that look, there are other ways to do these things without a TIF district, and you don't need to take a credit card out of the taxpayer's expense.
Thank you. Doug and Christine, I think I said their name earlier, they might have left. Doug and Christine.
to even have to comment on this, but I think it needs to be said. Last night, it was insinuated that I called the police on President Jen Conan. The unprofessionalism that was insinuated and accusations that were displayed astonished me. Conan ran on a campaign and continues to preach how transparent she is. She left out the main points of the story, which are why, where, and who called the sheriff on her. 20 minutes after I saw her on Heartland Drive, I heard that she was with someone and that a drone was going to be used on someone's private property. This is very puzzling to me that the president would even have the audacity to do that. The dispatch report shows the address that the sheriff was called to and proves that I was not the caller. Jen knows I didn't call the police because through a third party, she sent an apology to the individuals that did call the police. The fact that her statement regarding me was during an ethics hearing against herself bewilders me. If this confuses anyone in the room, listen to President Conan's comments that are posted on the Village YouTube channel. President Conan, when you ran for office, you put yourself in the public spotlight and open to criticism and pushback. Any public official should realize that. Now, totally different topic. As far as the TIF goes, you keep saying over and over again that you want a diverse tax base. But when a new restaurant finally comes to the village, you give them a 15-year tax incentive. Just make it make sense.
Donna Bachman.
My name is Donna Hoffman. I'm from Red Oak Drive in Elburn. I have lived in Blackberry Township for 36 years. In preparation for this meeting, I have wondered how to accurately describe how awful and completely helpless I feel about the proposed Crown development north of 88 and the negative effect it will have on Blackberry Township. I'm at a loss for words since it appears to me that anything Blackberry Township residents have said is taken lightly, plus we've been accused of lying about everything we say. I feel that our concerns have not been validated by the board or the current president. As a result, I would like to extend an invitation to all of you to drive 5 miles north on 47 and see where our homes are and how close we will be to the warehouse, along with the filling station and the truck stop. I feel maybe if you see the well caps in our yards, you'll realize the potential of danger that we have. Anybody have for it? Thanks.
Thank you. That is the end of my list. If there's anyone else who would like to make a public comment, you are free to do so. I'm sorry, sir, we got this one. Can you just state your name for the record? Thank you.
I'm Molly Reimer. I'm from Blackberry Township. I just have a couple of questions and wanted to talk about a couple of things. Why does the 34th richest family in the U.S. need our money? Why do they need a TIF? In addition to Crown Community Development, a residential and commercial developer with master plan communities all over the U.S., the Crown family is renowned for its wealth with a net worth of $10.2 billion, making them one of the wealthiest families in the U.S. Their riches were amassed through involvement in finance, investments, and holdings in companies like Maytag, Hilton, Altel, Aspen Skiing Company, New York's Rockefeller Center, and the Chicago Bulls. They also hold a 13% stake in the New York Yankees and brokered a very controversial agreement to expand O'Hare Airport. In addition to all these impressive acquisitions, Crown is also the most powerful shareholder of Material Services Corp and General Dynamics. General Dynamics is a publicly traded aerospace and defense corporation, the 5th largest weapons contractor in the U.S. and the 6th largest in the world. General Dynamics IT, a subsidiary of General Dynamics, has received over $4 billion from the U.S. Office of Refugee Resettlement for providing U.S. Border Patrol with remote video surveillance. Quite a powerful family. So why would a company this wealthy need to channel funds away from a small community like this? The hardworking people of Sugar Grove and surrounding areas, from Canelan schools, from Blackberry Township, from the police, fire, library, county, park districts, when Crown can afford to pay for this themselves. Show us the real math, what it's really going to cost us, and give us some transparency. Thank you.
Here, here.
Mr. T, I'm sorry. You're next.
Okay.
Okay.
name is Yvonne Garrity, I live in Batavia. I listened very carefully to the proposal or the presentation of the TIFs, and I spent about 2 hours this afternoon with the Kane County Supervisor of Assessments. I can tell you that the Friedman, or Freed, whatever his name was, told you some very serious mistakes. And so I would suggest that you spend some time with the Supervisor of Assessments in Kane County. His name is Mark Armstrong, and I have his telephone number and his contact information here. You might ask him the questions that you asked Freed, because he did not give you the correct answers. First of all, if the municipality buys the property, it goes to a completely zero tax base for the TIF purposes. And there will be no additional money that goes to the schools or the parks or the fire department or anything else. It all goes into the TIF. Even if you sell that property back to the developer. So, you know, he's leading you down the golden path, and you owe it to all of these people to get the absolute facts.
Thank you, ma'am. We're not buying the property. Thank
Well,
you. Thank you. Okay. Mr. T, please. Thank you.
Good evening. I will just speak from my personal experience. My name is Kim T. I just moved from Burridge to the area recently, about 3 months. I also serve on a state hospital licensing board for second term. TIF is good for the new development. TIF is good for the new development, but it's bad for the area residents. Years down the road, maybe my 5th granddaughter, who was just born yesterday, she would have to pay the price for the property tax if she continued to live in the area. Kane County Assessor's Office would have to play the catch up for the property tax increase. Burridge it has a full of warehouses. Burridge has full of warehouses along the I-55 and Plainfield Road and County Line Road and Willowbrook. One of the warehouses is half a mile from my backyard. Willowbrook Police Department is just diagonal across the street from this warehouse. House Sterogenic. Sterogenics ironically use their ethylene oxide for sterilizing the medical equipment that I happen to use every day in the operating room, ironically. Ethylene oxide leaking, polluting the environment, causing Willowbrook police officers, Matt Holler, I'm sorry, rare stomach cancer, he died. 2 doors down from my house, Paige is 22 years old. I watched her grow up from the baby. She turned 22 the other day. She's fighting for her life from lymphoma due to ethylene oxide from their warehouse. You guys want a warehouse house this hazardous material? I don't think that you could sleep if you have a family members dying from cancer. So many loss of life in the Willowbrook that incident. You Google it and find out. I personally involved. My wife is a cancer survivor. We moved to this area. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any other comments at this time. Yes, sir.
Hello, Carl Dinwiddie from Batavia. I wanted to endorse what Yvonne said. Now in Batavia, we had a TIF consultant who paid him pretty good for about 4 years, and about 3 or 4 board council meetings, I says, all we're hearing from you is rosy scenario. And finally, after a while, I think it was the 5th meeting, I said, who do you work for? Are you working for the citizens, or are you working for the developer? I'd never heard anything but rosy scenario from you. So having said that, I would suggest you do talk to, he said any of you could call Mark Armstrong, our elected assessor for Cowan County, and whatever your questions were, he will give you the correct answer. Don't rely on consultants. I guess that's what I'm saying.
Thank you, sir. Any other public comment? Anyone in the room? Going once? Going twice? We're gonna close public comment. Up next, we have discussion on solar energy on village property. Scott.
Actually,
Oh, that's
you may have
finance,
back up
ma'am.
to the mic, yeah.
I'm sorry, it's the finance portion.
Thank you, Board.
So at the last meeting, the solar on the property at 455 Arbor was presented, and we had discussed a couple questions that the board had, but also if the board was interested, how we move forward financially. The proposal that was put in front of the board was General Energy was the top choice, which was a purchase price of $1 million for this solar field. And what this will do, as presented last time, has a payoff within the first 6 years, where the village will be in a positive cash flow, and these last for 25 years. So what we wanted to discuss was, how does the village fund this, and what does that look like long term for the village? So the current village water capital fund, which funds all infrastructure within the village water fund, and because this will be funding directly the electric for the well treatment out there in the well, has $2.7 million in it. We looked at the current bond interest rate out there for us. It was estimated somewhere around 4 to 4.5%. So based on this, we determined that it wasn't the right idea to go out and bond on this, since the payback was so quick on the cash flow. So what I did was look at projections of using the $1 million as the purchase price, and the breakdown from General Energy of when those payments will be due. So in fiscal year 24, which is current, would be $620,000. That's time of signing is 30%, and then delivery of material, which is estimated in April, with an October time of signing. Fiscal year 25 would be the rest remaining, which is $413,000. However, there are going to be rebates and savings that happen with this program. So the first is within a year, the village will recoup $487,000 of the $1 million that they output. That's through the investment tax credit of 30%, Illinois Power Authority payment of $84,000, and then just the electrical power savings. The year after that, you would still get the Power Authority and the power savings of $121,000, and that will remain for the next 15 years. So you would make back in year one, the actual capital output would only be $546,000. So while we're taking funds that were currently attributed to current projects. How do we refund those? Right now, we budget our electricity out of the water operating fund. What we would do is we would increase that transfer from the water operating fund over to the water capital fund to replenish that money. And on that note, by fiscal year 30, which is year 6, we are already in a positive cash flow. What this does to the capital fund does not change our position in fiscal year 27, which is where we were showing the deficit already for our capital fund. This would not change that whether we did it or not. That deficit would still be there, so this project would ultimately only have about $200,000 left by the time that deficit happened. So the net effect over those years would not have the detrimental effect to having any of the current water infrastructure projects completed by doing this.
Thank you, ma'am.
Discussion or questions?
Well, I think it's a great return on investment. You know, it was something, I thought it was feasible a couple of years ago. It probably wasn't as efficient as the panels are now, but I think it's worth doing, and, well, I think the way you propose is correct.
Yeah, and we, Scott came in and had also a relationship with Progressive. I had been working with them through COVID, and it was a very slow process during while COVID was happening to do this.
Yeah.
So it kind of got brought back too. So yeah, we were looking at it about a year and a half ago.
There's also a change with the IIJA that allows, and that some of the statutes from Illinois allows us to get the return if we buy it. Before, we would have had to do a land lease program, and that it wouldn't have been as solid of an investment. So it was a little bit of lucky timing for us, and then I think it's going to work out better. If you have the money now, it's a better payoff. Before, you didn't have to upfront any money, but because it costs a lot more to borrow, those PPAs just don't make as much sense today.
Could we ask them to deliver the material after our fiscal year ends this year?
So we can, and again, this is a tentative timeline. If we have a contract signed in October, we don't even have a contract to even negotiate on. So yes, I think that we can delay because we're purchasing. I think we can tell them delivery date whenever we want. So yeah, we could push that second payment into next fiscal year.
I see that we're paying off some bonds next year, so I have those savings as well.
Correct. Yeah.
So what is our biggest unbudgeted expense that's coming up? I know we're looking at 47 Wyden and us having to foot the bill for those utilities.
So in 27, there's 3 projects. It's the widening relocation, Maple Street, and Joy water main. Maple Street is right now projected about $2.8 million. So that's where and in that year we have almost $5 million of capital right now. So that's where that deficit happens, is because those projects are all projected in that same year.
And those are capital projects, not operation.
Correct.
That's where we truly use our legislators, Scott's expertise in chasing down, and hopefully, because we do run a deficit in 27.
And we think using the funds for this project are better used because in the future, those projects may be eligible for more funding opportunities than this would be.
Alright, so that.
As far as just state level and even IEPA low interest stuff, this solar project is not going to be necessarily eligible under that program, so we would use our capital for this to make the projects in the future more eligible.
Alright, that makes sense.
And, utility expenses is one of the largest expenses in the utility budget, and this is something that we can control. You don't see the fluctuation from 6 cents to 12 cents, back to 6. So it'll help us hold the line on our utility rates.
Any other questions or discussion?
I did want to mention, Trustee Bynes specifically asked about the decommissioning. There's a spreadsheet in the memo detailing that it is roughly the same cost to get back in the scrap equal to what it would cost to remove the field. So provided that data, and then Trustee White is not here, but asked about other opportunities that might be better. They're emerging, but right now with incentives, the two best things to do are to look at potentially getting a LEED certified building and some of the things involved that would be with a new build or a renovation, which we're gonna look at, for the remodel of this building and then potentially also a new village hall. Wind is getting better, but the incentives are just not there. The reason this works is because of the incentives. We have to pay $1 million up front, but it will actually only end up spending about $350,000 to get the solar field, because of all the incentives we get back, and that's not including all the savings we get year to year on it. So it's just the time is right for solar for those reasons. When wind is good, we'll bring in wind project.
My question is, where does spreadsheet come from?
This was provided by Progressive from work they did in a different, they pulled the numbers for a different project to show the same thing. They're working on a bond, because it was they bonded the removal in a different project because it was one of those land lease agreements, so it wasn't village property or the property of the taxing body because of the lease for the duration.
My only problem with this, I'd like to see a third party, what they paid, maybe do some research and find out. I mean, Progressive, of course, is gonna put a spreadsheet together and make it look like there's not a whole lot of money being spent on the decommission. I would prefer to have it from somebody, if we can find one that's already been decommissioned, for some reason, and get an actual cost from that user and not from the person that is trying to sell something. I would appreciate that. I'm not sure if it's out there, but anybody can add numbers up like this, and I see there's scrap steel, but there's a few other little things I think that's probably missing out of here. I'd like to see that.
We'll reach out about the scrap. I have a lot more confidence in. We can maybe try to get a detail on some scrap. Brad and I'll work on that.
Right.
As far as taking out a field, it's very, very new in Illinois. We might have to try to reach out for some California data just because solar is extremely new in Illinois, so it may be a little bit different, but we'll see.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you.
And with that data, is there a percentage of the panels that are recyclable and the percentage that's not recyclable? What happens with that? There was something about some of the stuff that's being recycled in California and how it's some of the unrecyclable material is extremely bad for the environment. It's some of it was some of the material was really bad, and I think causing other issues as they're trying to recycle it. So there's a lot of it that can be recycled, but the stuff that can't, what happens with that?
So it sounds like, one, we need materials, what kind of panels are they planning on installing? That's what I'm hearing. Then scrap material, you want a different estimate, not from Progressive, so we're gonna work on that. My question to you as a board is, are those thoughts, in such a way that they deter you from doing this, or is it something that, let's say the panels, for example, you just want to ensure that we're using this panel versus that panel, and we can?
It was something with the fluid, something inside of it. I just want to make sure that if that was, and as I was looking, some things said that those were panels that are 20 years old, the technology's changed. And if that's the case, then I'm okay. But if the technology hasn't changed and there's still hazardous waste that's coming out of those things as they're sitting in a landfill or wherever they end up going, I think that's something I would like to wait on.
Okay. So, any other discussion? So what I would do, Scott, if this is what I'm hearing, I think you obviously have some due diligence to do, but at the same time, if you're able to answer those questions, and bring that back, would you be bringing back potentially a contract, or are we waiting for these answers to come back from the village board? I mean, you can still decide, because the contract's gonna have the detail. It's gonna provide all the information. So I would say you don't have to go forward with the contract, but if they do their due diligence, they go through all of this, they come back with the answers that you want, the detail will be in that contract. You don't have to approve it, but at least let's move let's keep the ball rolling, because it seems like the revenue, or with the savings, I guess, if you will, on this project is enough to keep the ball rolling. Okay, so you're doing all that and then bring it back contract with the detail in it, and they could board can look at it and decide at that time.
Sure.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. That's it, staff reports. Scott?
I have nothing else to add, but
Okay. Any other questions or comments or discussion based on Scott's staff report? Okay. The only thing I want to add based on your report is just under the FOIA request that the village has received. And I think this goes back to, just the need for Meredith as well. Just so the board is clear, obviously the obligation of the village to fulfill any FOIA requests is there, and we have to do it in a timely fashion. The assistant to the village administrator, Allison, has spent 100% of her time fulfilling FOIA requests. Laura now is breaking out the dollars that she's spending on FOIA requests, so the village board understands what that is. We do need assistance through Meredith. One, because we're basically down an employee on this job. In the month of August, I wrote my notes on my previous page. In the month of August, billings, and I don't even know if you did it for the full month, is $4,300 spent in legal fees, doing her redactions and looking over those documents. And August was a light month compared to September. So I would expect September is, I would say north of 10,000. That's my guess. We'll see where that comes in. The village to the community, we obviously owe you these documents. If you're looking for something, our obligation is to get it to you. There's a lot of duplication with some of the requests that come in. Allison has worked with the community to try to narrow the scope, but there are some documents the ask has been tens and about 10,000, 12,000 pages of items, and it takes time for them to look through every page to get the community what they're looking for. So I just want you to know that it is, it's a burden when you're a smaller community and you're looking to go through all of those. That burden we own, we have to handle, and we have to get you those documents. But I would ask that you be patient and you ask for specific information. If you are a group of people that you don't hit the village with one FOIA after another, that if you are truly looking for specific information, we're here to help and assist. But just bogging down the village with legal fees and time, I think we can spend our time and dollars elsewhere. But we still we owe you whatever document you're looking for. I'm asking the community to work with us so that we can continue on with the other daily business that we have. Up next, I'm sorry, with my staff reports. Give me a second. Yeah.
Couple things. Just in regards to the SME cloud implementation, I will be bringing that back the next meeting for discussion item on a change order that we have. They are able to move us up on an implementation timing. We were scheduled for June or July of 24 after signing in January. And actually, they're looking at being implemented a week after Thanksgiving. So with that change brings a cost that we've already committed to just into this fiscal year, but it's already funded. So that'll be for a discussion at the next meeting, but we are going to be up and running about 8 months earlier than anticipated.
Okay.
Matt, I'm not familiar with that. What is PS?
And that's our financial software that we have, and currently we're hosting it on our servers.
Oh.
This is an upgrade to go to the cloud.
Matt, can you just address, I know I've seen, I think it was on the village Facebook page maybe, comments that whatever the software, which is, the new software that we're using for bill pay.
Invoice flow.
Yeah, that it seems like the auto bills maybe not, I don't know if the staff has heard from any residents regarding issues that they've had. I've just seen comments on social media.
All we've seen in which we've addressed are the reminder emails that
Okay.
people are getting, and we've addressed those.
Okay, so nothing new.
We haven't heard anything on
Okay.
auto bills. I actually was going to give some stat updates because I know that was one of the big pushes was cutting down on paper, cutting down on payments, So we have a total of about 4,400 bills that we send out. In July before this, we had 960 people on paperless. As of September, we have increased that to 1,560. So we've increased that almost 65%. So that's cutting down on printing because we send it to a third party to print and mail. So all those mailings are now on. Auto payment was about 1,070 people, and in September we're up to 1,354. So we've increased it about 27% of people auto pay. So that means less checks coming in, less manual process on auto pays, but the paperless is the larger one because that's the actual savings that we're going to be seeing in mailings and printing costs.
Oh, that's nice. I like that. It sounds terrible. I probably shouldn't say this on recording, but what happens for me with an auto or paperless is, and I know the village does a great job, so if there is a leak, the village, and you have a high usage in a day or whatever, the village will notify you and let you know that you potentially have a problem at your home. But there's always that fear, because I do it with Approximate or two or something, and you don't realize what your bill may be because you're on auto pay and you're not paying attention. So that's the devil in the details, I guess, with not getting a bill in the mail. But and that savings to the village, and for the people that don't, they want to save a tree. That's great.
I have another question for Matt, if I may.
Yes, you sir.
On the CAFR that we have on page 9, it shows that you have a certificate of achievement for excellence in financial reporting. It says April 30th, 2022. It should be 2023.
No, so that's the audit you have is 23. So once it's completed, then they have to submit it. So it's always a year behind.
Is it? Okay.
The certificate that's in there is a year behind because we won't actually get that certificate until probably January of next year.
Okay.
That's how long it takes. So
Okay.
the one that's in the audit year presented is always the year prior, and then they'll submit this one for the next year.
Okay, just check.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions for Matt? No? Okay. Thanks, Matt. Up next, I have Walter.
I have no new information.
Thank you. Planning Commission meeting tomorrow?
Yes.
Any questions for Walter?
It appears that the retail over there in Sugar Grove Center stopped in the inside.
Yes. I'll just say that they have some contract issues.
Okay. That's
All right, thank you. Any other questions for Walter? Hearing none? Thank you, Walter. Chief?
We've mentioned this a few times, and it's a busy week for the police department, fire departments, and all the other supporting agencies that are helping to prepare to make a successful event. We will have some traffic delays if you're out and around Granite Road or off of Duke, so just be aware this weekend. It's going to be a little busy in and around Sugar Grove, because most of them are coming off of 88 to I-56 and coming. So, finally, happy to report that we have scheduled time with our outfitter for 2 squads that have been sitting in the back lot for quite a while. So, those are going up on, one's going up on Monday and Monday. So, hopefully we'll get those squads that have been out there out into the fleet.
Excellent. Are they planning on operating Granite this way they did last year, which is one way in, one way out?
Yeah, so Friday morning starting at 6 a.m. There'll be one-way westbound into the parking lots, but not through traffic. And then probably by dusk to close to 7 to 8 o'clock, we'll open it up in both directions.
Okay.
And we'll close it again each morning at 6 to 8.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I don't know if we can, Allison, put that out there.
Yeah, we were just talking about that.
Thank you. Okay, any other questions for Chief? Hearing none? Thanks, Pat. Brad? Nothing to add. Any questions for Brad?
Brad, I see they painted a lot of the fire hydrants, and I honestly didn't think that they needed them. Is that something we can look at spacing out, maybe more often, less frequent than every 3 years.
We can, part of the maintenance program, we adjust them all through the maintenance, it's been practice, it's fairly cost effective, it's more cost effective to maintain it as well.
Yeah, the paint looks so good, in years past it would fade and then we paint them.
They're switched to, it's a epoxy, it's two-part epoxy, like a direct metal paint now.
Yeah, might be something to consider in the future, but yeah, they look good.
How is the Metronet expansion going? I mean, it seems like I see the reels, I don't know if you know anything.
I believe they are really close to being done with all the conduit in Hannaford, and they're moving over to Stratford. It's all front area, so it's going well.
I do see them, they're parked over, in County Forest Preserve, parking on Hannaford, woods there, Gibson Mills. Excellent.
Quick question, I saw you had company at the Blackberry, pedestrian bridge, so we're on track with that.
Moving along slowly, yeah. Tied up.
I know, we're just excited to start with that. Other quick question, do you have any idea, estimate, I know whether it's permitting, but, for sign to be put down in Mr.
Supposedly early next week.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you, Heidi. Thanks, Brett. Any other questions? No? Okay. Trustee Michaels.
Did a bus tour with Crown on September 9th, along with Matt. We viewed some limited.
Just so it's on record, that was not with me. That's
Oh,
gas station,
yeah,
just so it's
yeah,
on record,
yeah.
not Matt,
Thanks.
pointing my way. so-
I'm sorry,
Thank you.
over you.
Okay, thank you.
But we viewed limited commercial development and looked at some residential in North Aurora and Naperville.
Anything else?
So.
Thank you. Trustee Lundy.
I did attend the final food truck Friday with my girls, my husband, and we had a fantastic time, so I absolutely love that program that we have, and, I think it's a great event. Also just wanna say, Lisa Campese was my daughter's Girl Scout leader, and she touched so many different, so many lives. Great way.
Trustee Heron.
I attended the food truck Friday. I was not as successful as Trustee Bonnie in leaving with a babysitter, though I tried.
Clarify that, please.
Yeah.
Clarify that as well.
Yeah. Yeah, wait. So yes, I saw a lot of people there. Trustee Bonnie, his family, she was able to, Mrs. Bonnie was able to take a babysitter home and then hang out. I tried Tony, but Tony just wasn't having it. Wouldn't handle my kids, I guess. But it was a very fun event, and yes, I really appreciate those. I did not attend the bus ride I was supposed to be on with Trustee Nichols, due to an illness, but wasn't COVID, and I recovered. I think that's it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Just for you, for clarification, I know that you introduced me to the woman at the school that is gonna be handling the tree
Yes.
for when we wanna do the street
Yep,
signing.
yep.
So I'm still gonna kind of work through, because I don't know that I have our.
That's absolutely fine. When we start talking about dates, when we get a little closer, I can absolutely be in the middle. But when you had questions and she had questions, I think she's, our assistant principal that handles a lot of the maintenance stuff, which we're working with the maintenance department we're going to also plant a bush for Lisa. And so we're just trying to coordinate it so it's on the same day. And so she's working with the school district maintenance department, and we're working with our people. We're just trying to coordinate it, and I can absolutely go in the middle with that. Just some of those initial questions I thought were better to hey.
No, it was good. I just think it's like, when's the date, right? Like, what's
Yeah.
the date and time and looking at, so I think
Yeah.
our staff would have to stay a little bit later to accommodate the school schedule, so that's all Brad's gonna need to know.
For sure. Yeah, and I think I can't even imagine what for a turnout, for community, for So that, like, I've worked in all three of the buildings that she worked in, and I got to work in one of them with her. But just such an impact, such big shoes, and so I don't even know what to expect with that. If people emotionally are like, I don't know, they're gonna handle it, or if it's gonna be just flooded with community. But it's gonna be exciting. Everybody is excited for it.
Good. Good. Way to honor her family too.
Yeah.
Trustee Mahoney.
Nothing to add to that.
Okay, thank you.
Can I go real quick?
Sure.
It's the Food Truck Friday got mentioned a couple times. I just wanted to thank Danny for all the work she does putting it together. And of course, Chief and his team for helping out with traffic, and then Brad and the Public Works team to get all the tables and everything done. Couldn't be done without our people.
No, thank you, but thanks for stealing my thunder.
Oh, sorry.
Heather, my list. But you know, I have to say, for those of you that were there and appreciated the fence, the security fence that was installed for obviously the police department, it does set a nice park-like setting with those picnic tables, and makes for a safe area as well for the children that are running around, if they're not, getting in that drive lane. So it does make, because now that whole area is technically secure, right, even from our police car, so it is nice. So yes, Danny, without you, we can't make Food Truck Friday happen. Without Brad, we can't make Food Truck Friday happen, and your team, and without Chief and your team, we can't make it happen, so thank you. Part of President's report is to report that I did attend a Ribbon and Road concert, and made a suggestion that we do have some surplus funds within that group, and that they potentially do a Friday event instead of Thursdays. They've done Thursday events partly to get the bands a little bit less expensive, but a lot of people still want to go to work on Friday and don't necessarily want to go. So on June 21st of next year, we'll be putting this out there, but on June 21st of next year, a band has already been committed. I don't know the name of the band, but we are doing it, the first event on Friday in conjunction with Food Truck Friday. So that has been confirmed. Our food truck event typically runs from 4:30 to 7, and the concert starts at 7. So it's a nice segue, Chief. There's going to be a little bit extra patrols because we'll likely have more folks making their way down to the library. So parking and that sort of thing. But I think it's a nice thing to try, that we do it on Friday in the summer in conjunction with that event. So that's good. Live Golf this weekend kicks off. I know there's I think the Pro-Am is on Thursday, so you'll have some traffic and some more people into the community. But then the event is Friday, Saturday, Sunday. There are concerts both Friday and Saturday. They have a website. You can look for their event schedule and all things that are happening in Sugar Grove with Live. Tomorrow we have the Metro West Council of Government Golf event. Our COG gets together with other area municipalities and mayors, administrators, board members. Also, I'm trying to think of the word. No sponsors, but yeah, consultants that we use and things like that. So they will all be present for that. So we look forward to that for any board members that are attending. That should be a fun night. I did have an ethics committee meeting last night, and happy to report that it worked out for me, that there was not a gift. That it was determined that what the PR piece that I received in my email was not a gift, and therefore I did not have a gift ban violation. So I'm happy that that is behind us and we're moving forward. I just want to let the community know that the village board is listening to you. We do not have a proposal. I know at times it's very frustrating to not know what's happening. There's times that the village board, I can tell you the village board doesn't know what's happening. There's times that staff doesn't know what's happening. We're waiting for a developer to provide information to the village in order for them to move forward. So I would say, as much as you might feel like your comments fall on deaf ears, they do not. That what I'm doing behind the scenes with staff is trying to shape a project, listen to concerns, before and mediate that before it ever hits the public. I cannot guarantee with any certainty that it's working, that it's going to come out perfect. But what gets presented to the village, to the plan commission, the village board, We'll have some level of vetting that went into it, but the plan commission needs to vet it, the village board needs to vet it. When it comes to TIF districts, you know, that's gonna be the most scrutinized part of this. We know Crown will move forward without it, but I can't say that your village board is gonna approve it. I don't know. So I just wanna let everyone know there is a process. When we say trust the process, that is the process. We have to let the facts come out. We are listening, you can make your public comments, but we can't respond to something we don't have information on. So the influence is happening behind the scenes, not a deal being done. So I just want everybody to be assured of that. And that's all I have. So I wish everybody a good evening, and we'll see you at our next village board meeting. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a first, trustee Michaels, and a second, trustee Lundy. Roll call, please.
Trustee Michaels?
Aye.
Trustee Lundy?
Aye.
Trustee